as I said, I'm here in Kansas City, so it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out.
Sure.
And before we get into your work and your life, I want to know, how did you survive the last 3.5 years? How did you get through the pandemic, and how did it change you?
Well, I worked in higher ed for 30 years as a professor and then as a dean and then a vice president. And I left higher ed just before the pandemic hit, which was just remarkably good luck.
Yeah.
And and then I moved to upstate New York because my wife got a job up here. And we toughed it out. It's just the two of us in a little house. We rent a little really small house because we were moving from Kentucky and it was a little bit hard to find housing. And then I decided to go out on my own. So what I did was I totally reinvented myself like so many other people did. I used that to my advantage, the pandemic and the fact that everybody's on Zoom, and decided to go out and become a leadership coach and speaker and writer and consultant.
So let's say I put you in front of a bunch of third grade students. It's career day, and you have to get to the soul of what you do on a daily basis. A kid says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I make daddy and mommy's bosses better.
Okay. Okay. So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Third grade. I don't
Yeah.
remember anything before my third year of college. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, it's funny. I went to Catholic school, and at one point I wanted to be a priest, which is sort of typical. And then I also wanted to be an architect, and I thought maybe I'd design churches.
Yeah.
Uh, that didn't work out too well. Became an English professor.
So take me back to your childhood and how these seeds got into you to be a teacher, to be in higher ed, to be in your current capacity helping leaders. How did all of this kind of grow into you today?
Yeah, I mean, there's no educators in my immediate family at all. I have an aunt who's a teacher and a couple cousins. That's about it. So it didn't really come through me, to me from osmosis or anything like that. But I was intellectually curious. I really loved reading and writing. And I thought I could really, help others have the same sort of appreciation and get the same things out of it. So really, I mean, I guess the main thing was I was just sort of being self-indulgent. I just wanted to learn for myself. But then when I got into teaching, I fell in love with that. The leadership portion's a whole nother thing. I've always been thrust into leadership positions since I was a little kid. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, just outside of the city, and I was a Boy Scout, and at like age 12 was made like the top leadership position in the troop or something like that, way before I had the rank officially to do that. So I wasn't official.
Yeah.
That's sort of been my whole life. Getting thrust into those positions. At 18, I was a boss. I had employees, um, and I got a lot of that, I would say, from my father. He's always been a true leader, and both my parents were always incredibly values driven, and that has been instilled in me. So I was always a values driven leader. It wasn't until I became a dean at a school where I realized that I needed to be a little more than intuitive about my leadership. The stakes were much higher, and I started studying it and making leadership my second discipline, and applying what I learned, making mistakes, learning from my mistakes, and teaching it to others.
So what was the first book that you read that really made an impact on you, that made you either want to read more or write?
The first book that made me want to read more, right? Well, I really couldn't tell you,
Yeah.
because that goes way back.
Yeah.
I remember I read the book, as a kid. I read The Phantom Menace over and over again.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, which is funny because I'm not real into fantasy now, but at the
Yeah.
time, really floated my boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that had a big influence on me. And then when I
So
was in high school, I discovered Jonathan Swift. I got exposed to
yeah.
reading Jonathan Swift, and behind my head are a bunch of Jonathan Swift books. That became my specialty for a long time.
Okay. All right. So who's been a hero for you, an inspiration for you in your life?
In many ways, both my parents. My dad passed away in March, and I gave a eulogy for him. And it's funny, it really didn't strike me how much influence he had over me as a leader, and my leadership philosophy. He really, and I know it's kind of cliche to say, "Oh, my parents are my heroes,"
Yeah.
but they really did have. I look to their example quite often. I always have. Just very deeply principled people, who really went against the tide. And I think that was amazing of them.
So if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, who would it be?
If I could meet anyone alive, is that what you said?
Anyone on the planet? Yeah.
Well, my second area of scholarship actually became Bob Dylan. There's another book behind me
Yeah, yeah,
about Bob Dylan that I'm actually have a chapter in. I still publish on him. I would love to say I would love to meet Bob Dylan, but he's kind of not a friendly guy all
yeah.
the time.
I've thought the same thing. I
Yeah.
I got close at one point. I got close to almost getting an interview with one of the band members that possibly could have led to him. And I'm like, I've seen the 60 Minutes things. I've seen it. He's, yeah. I think that time when he got really big and he just kept getting harangued about being the leader of the generation, I
Mhm.
think it fried his synapses. I think he was just like, I can't deal with these dudes anymore. I'm like out, you know.
Yeah, he
That
dropped out for quite a while after that. I mean,
yes, yes.
not far from here in Woodstock, and one of his band members actually lives right across the river from me.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah. Well, and he's still touring and
oh yeah,
he came through Kansas City relatively recently, so
yes, he did.
he's still doing it.
He sung Kansas City there.
Yeah, yeah. So, let me ask you this. What is your motivation every day to wake up? You're helping people, you're transforming lives. What is that motivation for you to get up and to do the job that you do and evolve as a person?
Yeah, I mean, in a broad sense, I want to lead a movement to take today's young bosses and make them the next generation of great leaders. I think that can be done. I think it's important. So I tend to work with a lot of people in their 30s directly as a coach because that's before they've been destroyed. And they're open to actually doing the right thing and learning some things. But in terms of my personal outlook, I mean, I'm in my late 50s. I had a long career as an academic. I mean, I was on the track to become the president of a college. Thank God I didn't pursue that. And I and I realized very late in life that you can change. You can change for the better.
Yeah.
I got certified as a tiny habits coach. And if you don't know what tiny habits is, it's a behavioral process developed by Dr. BJ Fogg of Stanford University. And it essentially takes very small behaviors and they grow into much larger behaviors. And
Yeah.
by getting involved in that, I started realizing just how much I can change myself and help change others for the better. And I've made a lot of changes in my own life in the past few years. And my goal is, I say my dad was my hero, and he died, in a lot of pain. He was depressed. It was hard for him because he didn't believe in change. He didn't believe you could change. So my goal is not to be like that. My goal is to have a better quality of life than that because it is a choice in many ways. There's
Yeah.
some things you can't control, and also to help others do the same.
So what's been one of your best success stories in this new line of coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's been quite a few, a lot of individual coaching successes and whatnot. I did get to partner with a couple of other leadership coaches who we actually went into a school in New Jersey it's a preschool through I think kindergarten. Very private school, very popular. There were hundreds of kids there, and they had new leadership. And this leadership was pretty savvy and decided that they were young and they decided they needed help. And they brought us in and we spent a day with the top administrators there and just sort of transformed their way of thinking. We weren't there 5 minutes before somebody was bursting into tears saying, "Oh my God, I haven't focused on myself in so long." And then we spent another day a few months later with their faculty and staff. There were about 60 or 70 of them. We broke them in two groups. We couldn't take them. We didn't have a space big enough for all of them. And so, and at one point, I was given a presentation, and they got so excited they burst out into spontaneous song, which I really wish I had a video of that whole thing.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
pretty.
that's cool. That is cool. So, of all of these things that you've done in your life, what are you the proudest of?
the thing I'm proudest of is the next thing I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of successes. I've done a lot of great things. I know I've transformed a lot of lives, and as a teacher and as a coach in a variety of ways. But I'm always looking to improve. My goal for myself in life is to leave this world a better place than it was when I found it, or at least have it better for me being in it.
Yeah. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the senior in high school, 18-year-old version of you. You can give that young version a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you impart on your young version?
After I got done taking myself by the shoulders and shaking myself
Vigorously.
vigorously, violently. No, I wasn't so bad as an 18-year-old. Yeah, that's it. It's funny. There's a great saying attributed to lots of people. Youth is wasted on the young, and oh boy, is that true.
Oh man.
You know, I mean, I'd probably say to myself, you gotta start taking yourself so serious, man.
Yeah.
You're not all that.
Yeah. That's the thing with youth. So, you're obviously very curious, adventurous sort, it seems to me. If you could go back in time and see one event in human history with your own eyes, where are you going?
Yeah, I know a little too much about history to want to go back in time. It's pretty disgusting. Um,
Yeah.
bad smells.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of periods of history I'm very interested in. The period when Jonathan Swift lived, the early 18th century in Britain. It's just amazing changes going on in the world in many, many ways, including intellectually. Um, so that would be certainly something that would interest me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's one of the things I'm really interested about history is what causes change, and how do you transform it into progress. And
Yeah.
I would say the 18th century is a period when we actually saw some progress intellectually, and it really informed who we are today.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jim, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all of your clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I am somebody who is, these are horrible questions. I'm, I am somebody who is trying to be better at whatever I do.
Yeah.
And to choose very carefully what I do. I used to do too much. Um, so I guess I'm just somebody who's always trying to improve.
So you mentioned Bob Dylan, so you obviously do you like to go see live music?
Oh yeah.
What was the first live show that blew you away?
The first live show I went to
Yeah.
was I was a teenager, maybe 14, 15. I went with a couple friends to the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and we saw Eric Clapton.
Wow.
And he wasn't very good, but at the time I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And he had this old fat guy who sat on a stool who opened for him playing guitar and singing this old timey music. And I'm like, boo, get this guy out of here. I booed Muddy Waters.
Oh no.
And now I have no time for Eric Clapton. I'm a huge Muddy Waters fan. So that is
Yeah.
you coming from Kansas City, you understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a sad thing I did. Um, yeah, really one of the probably the very first concert that really blew me away was Bob Dylan when I was
Yeah.
16.
Wow. That would be powerful. So if anyone wants to hire you, look into your life, reach out to you, anything about your world, where can they go?
Probably the first place to go is my website, guidanceforgreatness.com. Guidance for Greatness is my company. You can also check me out on Substack at jimsalvucci.substack.com, which is I do a newsletter and podcast every week. So I read my podcast. Some people listen, some people read.
Yeah, cool. Right on. Jim, this has been great. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful 2024.
All right, you too, Joe. Take care.
Take care. Take care.